course, always special being here. And I first want to give great thanks and honor to the senior pastor of this church, Reverend Robinson.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledge all ministers on the roster, deacons, mothers, family, friends, auxiliaries, everybody here today. Now, you gotta understand, I've been around the country training a bunch of cops. And they're not real good at call and response, giving me some feedback, some energy, some love. So I want y'all to talk back to me as much as you want. Say amen, nod your head, do whatever you need to do. I need to feel some energy. It's good to be here today. Absolute blessing. I do want to recognize my family that's here. My mother, both my brothers are here. My wife had to step out. My children, Zion Trinity, stand up. You stand up. Let them stand up. Never seen y'all in a while. Stand them up on the seat. They can see this little boy. All right. All right. That's the kids. Zion is almost tall as Kim now. So it's amazing how time flies and how these things work out. God is good. And all the time. God is good. Absolutely. So, special for me to be back here, and I just want to submit another thank you. You all know we went through, difficulty losing our dad a couple years ago. Still feels like yesterday. Thank you for all your support about that time, about that process. Even since then, I still get notes and texts and emails every now and again, and I thank you for that. Please know that we do keep Mount Welcome in our hearts and prayers as well. We follow you along. I still get the emails. I still go to the website and so forth. See what you all are doing. So it's great to see that you are moving on and doing God's work. All right, if you can, open your Bibles with me. You're going to turn to Mathew chapter 5, verses 17 through 19. I'm going to be reading from the New International Version. And then we're going to skip over, after that, to 1 John, 5th chapter, 1st to the 4th verses. So if you can, stand in reverence to God's word, if you are able to. So we start off with Matthew 5, verses 17 through 19. So I know this is Black History Month, and as Reverend Robinson, when I'm speaking and teaching, you're going to hear some Black history. That's just what it is. And I'm going to take a different twist today, so this should be pretty interesting to see how this works out. All right. And God's word reads as follows. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, if you will, flip over to 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5. It's not the Gospel of John, the letter. 1 John chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. And it reads as follows. 1 John chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves his child as well. This is how we know that we love the children of God, by loving God and carrying out his commands. In fact, this is the love for God, to keep his commands. And his commands are not burdensome, for everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. May the Lord add a blessing to the readers, hearers, and doers of his word. You may be seated in God's presence. I would like to use as a subject for today, Christians, God's law enforcement officers. Now listen. Christians, God's law enforcement officers. Y'all don't catch that. Oh, we got it. You're going to get it. All right. Now, if you want to know what I've been up to these last couple of years, it's been very interesting. So the bio gives you sort of a background and some summary of what's been going on. But I've been, so we started a national training institute of race and equity. So we founded that. It is separate from my duties at Morehouse College. And it's growing and it's a blessing. It is a testimony. I'll get to that a bit later. But as part of the work we've been doing across the country, we've been training a lot of police officers. And as some of you all know, when I was here, this is interesting, because those who were here a few years ago, I know we have some new members, but you sort of heard the first part of my testimony, the preview, before I left and went to the White House. I told you what was going on, I told you the situation there, and you're going to hear part 2 of how things turned out. So, as was stated, I had 2 appointments in the Barack Obama administration. The first appointment was as a presidential advisor, a commissioner, with the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. And my second appointment was as a senior advisor with the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Now, in my roles and responsibilities, I worked on a few different projects, including but not limited to the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. So what happened was the White House held a series of briefings at the White House where they sent an invitation out across the country to police chiefs and command staff to come to the White House for a day of briefings. So we had 10 different dates of briefings at the White House, 4 different dates across the country. So I was the White House's official implicit bias trainer, or unconscious bias trainer, when it came to law enforcement. So I trained over 2,000 police chiefs and command staff at the White House. What began to happen is those police chiefs began to invite me out to their respective departments to train their entire police forces. So between 2017 and 2018, I trained over 25,000 police officers across the country. Now, included in that 25,000 was the entire Los Angeles Police Department, the entire LAPD, right? Now, as you all know, many of you all know, LAPD is 10,000 officers. You had 100 sessions, 100 officers per session. I trained them all, literally every single one of them. And we maintain our relationship. I go back to LAPD every 6 weeks to train officers as they transition from their first year, probationary year, to their second year. So we maintain that relationship. We've also done work with Chicago PD, Philly PD, Phoenix PD, Seattle, all over the country, just in law enforcement alone. And that's in addition to corporations and many other sectors. So things have gone really well. What's happened has been interesting, though, training all of these cops. My empathy needle is actually, or my empathy muscle has grown to a significant extent, where some of you may be surprised a little bit at what I'm about to say. I actually, on some levels, can empathize with police officers. Okay? At some level. Right? What do I mean? When I start my presentations, I actually start off by saying, this is what I say to cops, I say, thank you for your service. Our brother's been, he can tell you. I say, thank you for your service. Why do I say that? Now, those of you who know my background, so I was born in the Bronx, raised in Queens, okay? I only spent 3 months living in the Bronx, so I grew up in Queens as a Mets fan, not a Yankee fan, Mets fan back in the day, right? But I came of age in the late 80s, early 90s, in the height of the crack epidemic in New York City. There's a lot going on back then. Okay, back then in the 80s and 90s, we had what we call red dog teams. These were police and plainclothes, unmarked cars who can float around Queens and engage the public as they saw fit. So say, for example, there's a group of black males on the corner, at the corner store, the stoop, red dog teams will pull up, sweep us up, take us to the nearest precinct, put us in lineups, and let us go. That was normal, okay? I've never been on the receiving end of excessive use of force personally, but there was definitely tension between police officers in the community back then. As a matter of fact, Bill Pratt, in his first iteration as police chief, walked 25 corrupt officers out of one police precinct in his first 3 months in office. Right, this is the late 80s. Lots going on back then. Even with all that, born in Bronx, red dog teams, raised in Queens, NYPD, crack epidemic, I still thank police for their service. I travel quite a bit, so I'm in 2 to 3 cities per week. I take 4 to 8 flights per week. Better or worse. But that's not sustainable, by the way. It's a season. It's a season. The notion is this. So sometimes when I'm flying, the pilot will get on a PA system and say, we have members of our military on the plane. Let's thank them for their service. The whole plane claps, we thank them for their service, which is needed and necessary. Any former military in the room? Former military in the house? Okay? Thank you all for your service. Absolutely. Now here's the deal. The military did protect our way of life on the coast and abroad, which is needed and wonderful. But for the average citizen in the United States, when you call 911, law enforcement shows up. Local police officers. We are much more likely to come in contact with local police officers than we are the military, right? And so I tell them that, And I still say, because oftentimes we don't say it, I still thank them for their service, for their willingness to do the job. You gotta understand, I'm the youngest of 3 boys, right? You all know this, right? So my middle brother, he's an attorney, finished Syracuse Law, came down here to Fulton County, was assistant district attorney for several years. He left there, went into the military. He was in JAG, Judge Advocate General, the military court system for the Army. He was in different hot zones, Afghanistan, Iraq, Korea, and so forth. Retired out of Fort Bragg last year as a major. Okay? All right, so the notion is when he would email me, it would say from cjackmarks@usarmy.gov. Wonderful and great, okay? So I've been in a situation where somebody close to me spent his adult life in the system, criminal justice system, on one side, prosecuting and locking folks up if they justifiably broke the law. He was a good one. He was a good one. He was like people up and over. He's one of those good people. He went to the prosecutor's office to do well, right? But I have other folks in my family, immediate and otherwise, and they've been on the other side of the criminal justice system. Like many folks in this room. But some family members have been locked up at a certain point. So I've seen this criminal justice system thing from a variety of perspectives. So please understand, even though, and I tell this to cops, and I still thank them for their service. Why? Their willingness to swear the oath, to put their lives on the line for people they don't know. All of them are not crooked. Some of them have some issues. Absolutely. I still have to thank them for their service. Matter of fact, check this out. I take it deeper. I say as a person of faith, I have to thank them for their service. Why? Blessed is the peacemaker. And they shall be called sons of God. All cops are not perfect, but their role is to facilitate peace. Here's the deal, folks. I've trained over 25,000 officers across the country. There are some bad apples, absolutely. But the vast majority of these officers, black, brown, white, otherwise, they have some balance. There's some good ones out there too. I would be remiss on not expressing to you the balance that we see. Okay? So some of y'all are looking all uncomfortable right now. You done drunk the Kool-Aid. Slow down. Slow down. But I am a scientist and I'm evidence-based. The evidence tells me, I've done ride-alongs, fly-alongs, I know a lot of cops. There's both good and bad in any industry. Okay, so I just want to offer that balance as we get this conversation started. Now, matter of fact, you heard the Justice Smollett reference. And again, in the large scheme of things, that's one incident. But when you look at the superintendent of chief of police, Eddie Johnson, listen to his statement that he made when he talked about the issue. Look at, in addition, we talked about Justice Smollett, that's one thing. But as he talks about Chicago, the police, and black people, right? It's very interesting. You listen to his statement, it's very balanced, very interesting, and I think it'd be informative how we go about our work and our engagement day to day. But let me give you a little bit of background in terms of this law enforcement piece. Now, what you got to understand is law enforcement is one piece. Law enforcement officers enforce laws that were created by legislators. Legislators are elected officials. They are the law creators. Police are law enforcement. You can have an unjust law created by unjust people. And then you have the law enforcement officers that have to enforce an unjust law. Now, we want our laws to be just, but it's a balance of both. You can have unjust lawmakers and unjust law enforcement. It's 2 different levels. You need to talk about both. So if you think a law is unjust, you can look at how the officer is enforcing that law, but you may want to elect some people who's going to change the law in and of themselves. Right? So that vote thing is absolutely critical, folks. This next election coming up, y'all better pay attention. Y'all better pay attention. This thing is getting real serious. All right? So, and if you don't like these laws, change the people who make the laws. You can also talk about law enforcement. We have both lanes going on. So when you talk about the origins of law enforcement in the United States, it's very interesting as well. As you all know, many of you all know, it's sort of a sorted and varied history. And so the first municipal, what we call local police, sort of started in Boston around 1838. But in the South, it's a bit different. So we talked earlier about 1619, 400th year, we're celebrating that. That's wonderful. Now, what you got to understand about the South, many of y'all are Southerners, so you know some of what I'm about to refer to. The origin of law enforcement in the South, very interesting. The people who eventually became law enforcement officers in the South, prior to being law enforcement officers, you know what their primary function was? Capturing runaway slaves. Got to hear it. That was the primary function of the people that became the first police departments in the South. Why? The police is two key tasks of the police is to protect life and property and a threat to it. Life and property. During slavery, black folks were what? Property. Exactly. So the slave master would say, go get my property and bring it back. When you hear the term steal away, we know that black folks say steal away what? You steal property. Even the language they use is influenced by the perception of themselves as property. Steal yourself away. So these law enforcement officers, their main job, you got to get this, their primary function was to capture runaway slaves. And eventually they became local police officers. Right? So you get the context. So we must understand is, in the history of the United States, law enforcement has a history of enforcing or managing, or even some would say controlling, black bodies. That was part of their function, keeping them in line, keeping them in order, keeping them restricted in certain ways. Okay? Now, again, you got to understand this in a historical context. Now, so when we have these officers in the South, and this is their primary function, they become municipal police and so forth. Here's what happens. So slavery ends. All right, 1865, the war, everything's not, I would say everything's good, everything's changing, right? We go into Reconstruction. Now, what happened in the South, any Southerners in here? In the South, those police officers are like, well, what are we going to do now? Right? We can't catch these runaway slaves. So what happened was, plantation owners, sheriff's department, municipal police get together and say, hey, you know what? We still need people to work this land. Let's work out a situation. So what happened was, you created the notion of convict policing. If you're a black person, after slavery ends, you're hanging out after sundown, loitering, not doing anything in particular, the local police can pick you up, charge you a fine for loitering, put you in jail. They knew you couldn't pay the fine, so they say, okay, well, you can work off your fine by going back to the same plantation you just was freed from. It was structured, organized, legal slavery. I gotta get this. And it was enforced by law enforcement officers, controlling black bodies, putting them back into what some people perceive as their place. Okay? You got to understand how structured this thing was. Okay? Then we talk about Jim Crow laws, right? Jim Crow laws, they had a whole season of that, right? White fountains and movie theaters and white buses and things like that. So police officers played a role in enforcing that. You got to understand, let me be clear with this. The slave patrols and their primary function, you got to understand psychology of early law enforcement officers. The primary function, to chase down, apprehend, and return runaway slaves. Number two, to provide a form of organized terror to deter slave revolts. They didn't want the slaves revolting, so they would terrorize the slaves on a plantation just randomly to prevent them. It was revolt prevention. We were the first people to experience modern-day American terrorism outside of Native Americans. They were slaughtered. Native Americans were slaughtered. That's a whole other conversation yet. Third, to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers if they violated any plantation rules. So following the Civil War, we had slave patrols evolved into modern Southern police departments. And then we had police serving as what we call a visible obstacle. What do I mean? Remember, I say this to police officers. So they say, well, those are years ago. That doesn't apply today. Black folks, y'all should stop committing crime. I say, okay, all right, okay. But let's understand this historical context. If you have unjust laws, and you are the law enforcement officers enforcing unjust laws, we don't see the lawmakers, black folks saw you. And when I talk to cops, I say, look at it. Y'all were the ones that recaptured us when we ran away. Police officers. Y'all were the ones doing Jim and Jane Crow that would pull us off the buses up from the front to the back. Y'all were the ones in the Woolworth counties that pulled us off the stools. Y'all were the ones standing outside at the Pettis Bridge beating us up. Y'all were the ones in front of the courtroom bowl counter spraying hoses on us. It was you. The police officer was the visible, physical representation of the obstacle for black people to be American in this country. Right? You have to understand that. So that law enforcement piece is very tricky here. Right? Because they want to be detached. You cannot detach that. We're talking Black history, folks. I understand this is uncomfortable. Now, some people in this room, this memory is not that far away. Some of your parents and grandparents will tell you stories firsthand about this. Okay, you got to understand this. My father was a sharecropper. You don't know that. Right? Tylertown, Mississippi. Lived on a farm, was in Walthall County, southern Mississippi. Their main crop on their farm was cotton. He was one of 12 siblings. My father, when he was 15 years old, picked 412 pounds of cotton in one day. Right? Grown men could barely put 200 pounds. He picked 412 pounds of cotton in one day when he was 15. And so I'm looking at him, he's telling us his story. I'm looking at him, I'm saying, that seems excessive. Right? He said, well, whatever I was asked to do, I always did my best. And on that day, 412 pounds was my best. Right? Now imagine growing up in a household, and I'm telling this dude, I don't want to do my homework, and he done picked 412 pounds of cotton. So that gives you a sense of the work that God was supposed to do early on, but nonetheless, we can't romanticize the past, and we look at it in a balanced way. So, you have to understand that piece. Now, in terms of law enforcement in the more modern era, we can talk about civil rights, right? So in the civil rights era, Pettis Bridge and so forth, talk about Black Power movement. They infiltrated undercover our Black Power organizations, right? Black Panthers, SNCC, and so forth. right? We talk about the war on drugs, which started in the 70s actually. Don't be deceived. The war on drugs originally started under Nixon in the early 1970s. It was coordinated as a distraction. Don't be fooled, right? Now, and when I tell these officers this too, they're a little surprised. And not only did they not enforce the law enforcement, the laws as they should have in black communities, some would say they facilitated or assisted in the flood of drugs going into our community, right? So it was hypocrisy from the beginning. There's a war on something you're helping to happen and you're profiting from. Isn't that interesting? An interesting paradox, right? Again, these are hard conversations to have, but don't worry, I'm bringing it home. Just work with me here. Now, we know about, let's bring it up to date. Stop, question, and frisk, right? New York City, that went up for years, right? And the data is clear. Stop, question, and frisk did not work. It put blacks and Hispanics at disproportionate targets of being stopped, of being harassed, right? The data is clear. Stop, for those who don't know, stop and frisk in New York City and other cities for several years, officers walking down the street, right? They saw a black and brown, I shouldn't say that. If they saw anyone walking down the street, they can stop them if they suspected they might have a gun or a weapon or drugs or something like that, right? Stop, question, and frisk was the name of it, okay? And let you know, some black males in New York City would stop 20 times per week, randomly. Just going back and forth to work. They might have worked off hours, walk back and forth for the train in black and brown neighborhood. That sort of things happen. So the police have a very complex history in their relation to African American peoples in this country. They have to understand that. You have to understand that as law enforcement officers. So yes, the laws can be unjust, but how you enforce the law can also be unjust. It works two different ways, right? Now, folks, you got to understand. I'm working with police chiefs talking like this, right? With police departments talking like this, because I have to give them their balance. I have to speak truth to power, right? So I want you to understand them. I want them to understand you. It is a very complex system because it's easy for them to be dismissive. They say, well, black people, why don't y'all, other people come here from other countries, other immigrants, why don't you all do as well as them? Slow down. Slow down. Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. Folks, people are like, oh, you're very, folks, first of all, let me back up. People say, well, the United States, we're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. Actually, that's not even true. That is factually incorrect. And I don't want to hear from this day forward refer to the United States as a nation of immigrants. That is factually incorrect. What do I mean? To migrate is a voluntary act. To seek refuge or a better life on purpose with intent. When you say the United States of America is a nation of immigrants, you are dismissing the Native American experience and the African American experience. Why? Native Americans were already here, they were slaughtered. African Americans were here in chains by force. That is not immigration. Look up the word immigration or migrant. It doesn't fit the definition. Right? We are not a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of foreigners, say Native Americans who are already here, indigenous people. Right? We all came here from other places on a variety of circumstances. Right? Don't take the bait. Then they say, well, why don't you all do as well, black people, Native Americans, as other immigrants? Slow down. Why? When you have different input, you have different output. Different input, different output. Don't compare the descendants of trauma and terror to people who come here voluntarily. That is a spurious comparison. It doesn't even fit. It's apples to oranges, right? Folks, you gotta understand the psychology of the immigrant. The immigrants try to escape something. They want to leave their family, culture behind. They come to this country for a better life. There's a certain type of person that has the fortitude and courage to leave their home country to do that. The immigrant, special, bless them, and so forth. But if you are forced to come here in chains, that is not the same input. It is a different circumstance. Right? And then, folks, you gotta understand, the United States of America, it was... Go ahead. I'm on tape. All right, check it out. You got to understand the history of this country. The United States of America was an economic endeavor. Talk about bringing your free, your huddle masses, please. That came later. The original rationale of the United States of America was economic. Here we go. American history in 2 minutes. Here we go. Rich European countries wanted to get richer. So they sent explorers out, explore out, and bring us back more stuff, more resources, more oil, bring back more stuff. This was one of the lands they went to bring back more stuff, to rich European countries. They got to this country, a lot of resources, but there's people here, Native Americans, got rid of them, got a lot of land now, need people to work it, let's get some Africans. So you had the richest country in the history of the world, today, the richest country in the history of the world. Here's the deal, folks, if you had free land and free labor for 240 years, you'd be rich too. And if you're not, there's something wrong with you. Right? So let's not be deceived. Right? Let's not this. Right? Folks do not romanticize the past. People are like, oh, well, I'm really American. Because you hear people today, that's so bad. You hear people today saying things like, oh, we're losing our country, my country, our. Be very careful when you hear people talk about this country in possessive terms. My, our, my. Like the U.S. is something they can put in their pocket. Please. Right? Listen, there's some people say, well, I'm really American. I'm related to the founding fathers. Well, first of all, you're probably not. No. But even if you were, right? Them dudes had issues too. Right? Now, many of y'all know this. Now, the founding fathers were brilliant at structuring government. Brilliant. This is being tested today. Right? But brilliant at structuring government. Brilliant. But most of the founding fathers owned slaves. They thought women were inferior. They thought white males that own property should not be allowed, that did not own property should not be allowed to vote. And they defined black people as 3/5 of a person in the U.S. Constitution. So before you take credit for them dudes, you better give it some thought. Alright? Now you gotta understand the 3/5 clause wasn't even the original fraction. They debated that for 3 weeks in Congress. It was like 1/2, no, that didn't work. 3/4, no, that didn't work. 4/5, no, that didn't work. 3/5 was like the 5th or 6th version of it. It wasn't even the original. For weeks they debated this. Electoral college is based on what? Racism, because of the fraction of human beings. Let me back up. People say, well, electoral college is a one man, one vote. Understand the historical context of the electoral college. It's dripping with racism. Dripping. Here's what happened. Rich white folks in the north, rich white males in the north, rich white males in the south. There's more rich white males in the north that could vote. They would take over Congress. They'd have more representation. Rich white males in the south said, ooh, that's not cool. How do we do that? Rich white males said, in the north said, I don't know how you do that. In the south they said, well, we got to change the structure. So they wanted to count black bodies as 3/5 of a person to increase their representation in Congress. Did not want to give them the vote, but wanted to count their bodies in fractional terms to enhance their representation. That's the origin of the electoral college. Look it up. So we need one man, one woman, one vote, yes, but we need to get rid of it because it stinks, the stench of racism, right? And some of y'all may look a little uncomfortable right now, all right? When I started off, you think I was going to go here, but I cop talk, right? But the notion is this, we have to have this balance, okay? So folks, do not let people make those serious comparisons between the immigrants and African Americans and so forth. That is not an apples to apples comparison, it simply is not, okay? All right, back on script, all right, here we go. Now, and turn into our scripture here. All right? I thought I was done. All right? Now, and again, with the cop thing, I also do tell them, in terms of these officer-involved shootings after the last 2 or 3 years, the enforcement of the law, there's some issues there. Right? From Eric Garner, to Tamir Rice, Atlanta Bastille, Oscar Grant, these sort of situations are issues. Absolutely. They have to deal with that. They have to work through that, right? And the thing is, here's the data. This may shock you a little bit. Now, actually, more white people are killed by police every year than any other group. Okay? But when it comes to less threatening circumstances, unarmed people or people that are not attacking police, more black and brown people are killed as a percentage. Both things can be true. As an overall number, more whites are killed by police under various circumstances. When they're unarmed or not attacking, it is black and brown. So there is a legitimate argument to have there. We have to have that balance as we take this into account. But let's talk about our scripture here, and I'm going to bring it home to you because I'm wondering why I'm going through all this. All right, now, what does Matthew 5:17-19 says? Okay? Do not think that I have come to abolish the law, the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Going over to 1 John, I'm going to focus on verses 2 and 3 in chapter 5. This is how we know that we love the children of God, by loving God and carrying out his commands. In fact, this is the love we have for God, to keep his commands. And his commands are not burdensome. So Jesus came to fulfill the law. He demonstrated, embodied, and enforced God's law. In a real sense, Jesus the Christ was God's first true law enforcement officer. Not that the prophets didn't fit. There were God-abiding people all the time. But Jesus was the perfect representation by his life of enforcing God's law. I'm going to catch you up. God was the legislator. He created the law. Jesus, through his life, was law enforcement. He demonstrated the law. Didn't write it, he enforced it by how he lived his life. Y'all listen to this, right? To be Christian is to be what? God-like, to be Christ-like. If you want to be like Christ, do what he did. He enforced God's law with his life. How he lived, his influence, his testimony. If you love God, we put it like this. If you love God, you will do your best to obey or enforce his laws through how you live your life. Here's my question. How you live? How you live? If I look at your life and look how you live, well, I see God's laws being enforced as a witness. Can I see God in you? That's real talk right there. Right? Folks, there's over 1,000 explicit commands and laws in the Bible. So it's hard to live up all of them. I mean, it's hard to memorize and all that stuff. I get that. Jesus said that if you consciously set aside spiritual laws, you will be least in heaven. But if you practice them, you'll be great. But if you believe, if you practice them, you'll be great. So basically, if you're a believer, you're going to be in heaven. If you believe Jesus Christ, personal Savior, you'll be up there, right? But if you set aside the laws while you're here, you might have a little house down the street, little one-bedroom apartment, something like that, a humble abode, right? But you'll be there because you believe. But if you follow these laws, you live your life in obedience, enforcing God's law daily, you're going to be great in the kingdom of heaven. So believers will get there. But just the state that you'll have while you're there may be some variation. So just keep that in mind. I believe. I just do whatever because I believe. Okay, I hear you. All right? So what are the most important laws? Say, well, I need to obey the law. I want to be a law-abiding citizen when it comes to being a Christian. All right, so here's the easy part. There's over 1,000 laws. I keep it basic. Start with the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes. All right, start there, and you can go elsewhere. So those who remember, so 10 Commandments, Exodus 20. Beatitudes, Mathew 5. Those are your basic. That's the basic. Get you started. And then you can dig deeper. So you want to know which commands. Then going back to the scripture, because think about this. Matthew 22, 36 through 40. A young man approaches Jesus and said, I want to be a follower. I want to be one of your disciples. What do I need to do? And Jesus said, y'all know the story. So the young man says, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So I'm making it real plain now. Love God and love each other. Okay? All right? That's as simple as it can be put. Right? If you can go your way. Now, what do you mean if you love God? What does that look like? Obey his commands. Repent. Right? Be in fellowship and relationship with God. Be a living witness. That's how you can show that you love God. Some of the ways. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do you want us to? Because you got to think about this. Love your neighbor as yourself. We always say that. It's sort of a trite, say casual and so forth. Really take it literally. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? So, here's some things to consider. Do you want your neighbor to steal from you? Then don't steal from them. You want somebody else to sleep with your spouse? Then don't sleep with theirs. And it's not that hard, right? You don't want somebody lying on you? Don't lie on them. I mean, this stuff is not rocket science here, right? You don't want somebody to curse at you or curse you? Don't curse them, right? You want somebody to pay you back the money they owe you? You pay people back the money you owe them. Right. You don't want anybody to hurt or murder somebody in your family. Don't hurt or murder somebody in theirs. All right? If you want somebody to apologize when they've wronged you, apologize when you wronged them. See, for some of y'all, loving God can almost seem easy because it's abstract. You can love a perfect being, right? You can pray and all of that. It's hard to love that person in the flesh that you see every day who gets on your last nerve. It's hard to love them. Right? But God in that, look at you looking sideways right now. Okay. The bottom line is this. I'll make it plain. Here's a question to consider. Are you a thermometer or a thermostat? A thermometer or a thermostat? Now, different preachers have used this analogy in different ways. I'm going to give you my spin. This is what we call slaminescence. Or the beast. My MC name used to be B Slammer, by the way. B Slammer. B Slammer. So this is my spin on what we call slaminescence. Here we go. Are you a thermometer or thermostat? What is a thermometer? Thermo means heat. Meter means measure up. So a thermometer and thermometer is a reflection of the environment. It reflects the temperature. The mercury inside the thermometer will rise and fall with the heat of the day. It responds to the environment. It follows the environment. Okay? It reflects it. Thermostat is different. Thermostat influences the environment. You walk into a room and it's too warm, what do? You adjust the thermostat, and the room adjusts to it. Here's the question. What manner of man or woman are you? Thermometer or thermostat? The thermometer man or woman, say y'all go to work. The thermometer man or woman, they walk into the workplace and they want to go along and get along. They rise and fall to the lowest common denominator. Everybody taking 2-hour lunches, you take them too. People on the internet for 3 hours a day, you on it too. Right? People not returning phone calls, you don't return them either. People taking home office supplies, you take them home too. Yeah, I got y'all, I got you. Right? The thermometer is a follower. The thermometer wants to fit in, wants to go along and get along. The thermostat is different. When the thermostat walks into the room changes. Check it out. So I was in Los Angeles about 20 years ago. Some of my fraternity brothers, we were sort of hanging out, just one in the house, having a good time and so forth. And one of my boys, another one of us, comes into the house. And he sees that it's just the fellas, it's just the guys in the house. So he says, oh, where the hoes at? Where the hoes at? Asking where the women are, referring to them as hoes. And then he sees me. He says, okay, Bryant's here, I'm sorry. Where are the queens and the princesses at? I'm not called women out of their name. I don't curse. I don't say the N-word. I have not for over 20 years. I don't judge people who do, but my very presence in that moment changed his language. That was a thermostat moment. So here's a question for you. What impact do you have when you walk in the room? Right? If you're a thermometer, you walk into the room, people are like, oh, it's on now. 2-hour lunches. Let's go home early. Let's cut corners. That's thermometer impact. That's like a party when you walk in. When a thermostat walks in, the room changes. Oh no, answer that phone, girl. Do your report. Do your job. He don't play. She don't play. If you're a thermostat, the very thought of you should raise the level of excellence and work ethic in the room. That's the thermostat impact. Right? And let me speak prophetically to the thermostats in the room right now. I can tell you this. You might find yourself as a thermostat in a situation where you're surrounded by a bunch of thermometers. All right. And if you are a thermostat surrounded by a bunch of thermometers, here's what may happen. Sometimes some thermometers, a critical mass of them, can become so functional in their dysfunction that it seems normal. I missed that. That was good. That was tweetable. That was good. Right? The notion is this. Sometimes the dysfunction, the 2-hour lunches, 3 hours of internet, going home early, the cutting corners, the dysfunction can become the norm. So when you do the right thing for the right reason because you're an excellent person, you're going to feel strange. Folks, let me tell you, if you want to be successful in this life or any other, I'm telling you, I read a lot of bios of successful people. And one of the few things I've noticed, which is ironic that they have in common, they tend to talk about having moments or seasons of feeling lonely, of feeling alone. Because they were thermostats surrounded by a bunch of thermometers. And they felt strange. Imagine feel strange for being excellent. That's when you know you're around a bunch of thermometers, especially if you're a visionary. They will not see your vision. Very difficult for the thermometer to see the vision of a thermostat. Very difficult. It's going to require some tact. But here's what you must understand. Thermometers will always be amongst you. Just accept it. But iron sharpens iron. So if you're a thermostat in this room, you give it a couple other thermostats, and y'all move this thing. Y'all, a critical mass of thermostats can move most organizations. Okay? The thermometers will always be there. Just trust that. Okay? To the thermostats in the room, I know you might be underpaid, underappreciated. You don't always get the kudos that you deserve. What I say to you is, do not become weary and well-doing. For in due season it will pay off. Especially if you are in a season of service and improving other people's lives. If you are in public service, on the front lines, you're volunteering, whatever it is, if you're improving people's lives, you may not see it in the natural. And some of you are will. But just know you are doing God's work. You are enforcing the law. All right, let me wrap up here. So, some of y'all know the beginning of my thermostat story. When I was here a few years ago, my thermostat law enforcement story. So for those who don't know, I know we have new members here at the church. It's great. It's growing. New members. It's great. So for those who don't know the background, so I'm a professor at Morehouse College. And I had an appointment. My first appointment was in 2013 with the Obama administration, but I could work it from Atlanta. My second appointment started in 2016. It required me to move up to D.C. So I was hesitant in moving because a lot of times when professors go up to the White House, it's very prestigious. And their home institutions continue to pay their salary and benefits. My home institution, I should say home institution, my two bosses said, well, you can go, we're not going to pay. There's not a Morehouse thing. These are two individuals. I love Morehouse, okay? Two individuals. You can go, we're not going to pay. I said, well, man, my wife wasn't working at the time. I'm working at HBCU already with a humble salary. I can't afford not to get paid, right? And then I said to myself, remember, it was 2016. So then my negotiations happened in the fall of 2015. I was going up in 2016. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to go. And then something kept eating at my spirit. I said, this is the first black president we've ever had. This is the last year of his office. If I don't go, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go. I didn't know how it was going to work out. Folks, this is what you call a leap of faith. I'm telling you, folks. And the thing is, so they said, okay, at the end of the day, they said, they'll give me 1/3 of my salary for one semester. So I go up there. Now, you got to understand this. I could afford a place to live. It just so happened, God, that a friend of mine from graduate school lived in Maryland, right? About 40 minutes away from downtown. He worked in D.C. He's a bachelor. He had a 3-bedroom house. I moved in with him, got my own bedroom. I ride with him into work every day. Get at his job. It's 2 stops away from where I work. I didn't know how I was going to get back and forth to Atlanta to see my babies and so forth. My daughter had to work for Delta Airlines. So I had flight benefits because my daughter worked for Delta. Didn't have to pay to go back and forth, right? Then even on Metro, I got a Metro card from a co-worker who didn't use it because they drove in. Bless them. Now you got to understand this. So now I'm at the White House. Right, I'm at the White House, right, doing the work day to day and so forth. And so we're planning a conference with Barbara's Keeper. President Obama's going to be there and so forth. And they say, okay, well, we need somebody to talk about implicit bias. First be implicit bias, unconscious bias. I said, well, you know, I kind of do that. They said, really? Okay. So they give me a shot. I give a workshop, 1-hour workshop at the White House on implicit bias. The thing about the White House, they have the power to convene. People are there from all over the country. They started to see me speak, police officers, law enforcement, education, corporations started inviting me out based upon those few presentations I did in D.C., right? Bloomberg Associates gave me a contract to do trainings for their 12 target cities across the country. The Campaign for Black Male Achievement gave me a contract to work with them on some training. I didn't even know this was coming. Understand, my wife was not here. She'll tell you, we did not know how the bills are going to be paid. And that's real talk. So the thing is, I don't begrudge those 2 people who were hating on me. They were part of my testimony. Without them, I wouldn't have this. I'm trying to tell you, I enforced the law. What did I do? I gotta understand this thing, right? I enforced the law. So the thing is, God made this stuff happen. Here's the kicker, though. Here's the kicker. My old bosses, fired and gone. The ones that hated on me, I'm talking about fired and gone, like walk off campus fired and gone. My classroom, rather than teaching 200 students a year at Morehouse, I teach 20,000 across the country. My classroom has expanded. I speak to over, I shouldn't even say this. I'm only going to say this as part of the testimony, all right? I make more in a month now than I did all year at Morehouse. You gotta understand, I did not see this coming. Y'all heard me when I was here back then. I was all scared. I know what I was gonna do. I confirmed it. I confessed it. I claimed it. I didn't know how it was gonna work out. I could not see. Folks, sometimes if you can't see it, God sees it for you. Just understand that. Just understand that. But you got to enforce the law. So what did I do? It said, what did he say? Seek ye first the kingdom of God. So I stayed prayed up every day, seeking him first. What else did he say? He said, don't lie. I try to tell the truth. He said, don't envy. When I saw other people blowing up, who I went to college with, doing all well, and I was broke, right? 1/3 of my salary, I did not envy them. I celebrated their success. Don't envy. I'm not envying them. Right? Don't commit adultery. I haven't done that. I was in D.C. I traveled all around the country. The thought even never crossed my mind. I don't cheat on my wife. Please. First of all, I love my wife, so I get in trouble. But I'm just saying. But you gotta understand. You know what? Really, you know why I don't cheat on my wife? Here's the deal. Why I don't cheat on my wife? Because I made an oath to God. I promised God to be faithful. If I cheat on her, I'm breaking my promise to him. And I'm scared of God. I'm talking about Old Testament. Old God. I'm talking about that dude. Right? I ain't playing. Right? right? So notion that I had to be obedient, right? Raise up your child the way that they should go. That was one of the commands. I tried to do that. I tried to be a good father, right? Love your enemies. As hard as that was, I forgave those two people who held me back. If you're going to love your enemies, please understand, those enemies can be part of your testimony. Right? I forgave them. I didn't forget, but I forgave. All right, so I'm healed. All right. So here's the question. So I ask you here. Are you ready to be God's law enforcement officer? Y'all ready for this? Are y'all ready for that? Okay. If so, then please stand and take the oath of office. You're going to do this. Come on. Stand and take the oath of office. Here we go now. All right. Y'all ready? Raise your right hand. Don't worry. This is reaffirmed. Don't trust me. Trust me. I, say your name, do solemnly affirm that I will support and live out the laws and commands of the Bible, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and defend God's word against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of a Christian peace officer to the best of my ability. So help me God. Congratulations! You are officially